Good afternoon. I call this meeting of the Job Growth, Energy Affordability, Policy, and Finance Committee to order. Today is Tuesday, February 14th. Happy Valentine's Day to everyone. First order of business is approval of the minutes. Representative Sundin moves approval of the minutes dated February 8th. Is there any discussion, changes, corrections, or additions? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Motion prevails. The minutes are adopted. All right. First bill up.
Mr. Chair?
Representative Sundin.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, before we start the order of business, you'll notice that Representative Metza is not in the room today. He's a new father of Josiah Metza, who set a world record today, and he was speaking at 9 hours old.
Well, I'm sure at some point, I'm sure,
For 9 hours.
knowing
Quiet for 9 hours.
knowing Representative Metza, he's probably streaming this right now in the hospital. So congratulations to both Representative Metza and his wife on their new arrival, their first child, and just take your time getting back. No rush. No rush at all. So, no, I mean that in a good way. So, members, the first bill, in Representative O'Neill, I'm going to start with Representative Cornish because you're on the committee and you'll be here. So, Representative Cornish. And I believe Representative Thiessen's a co-sponsor on it, and he flagged me and made the motion to move that House File 468 be recommended to pass and referred to the General Register. Ways and Means. My apologies. So, Representative Cornish, to your bill.
Mr. Chairman, members, House File 468 is a bill for $101,000 appropriation to go to the Department of Economic Development and Employment. It's to go to the city of Madelia for infrastructure needs. What brought this about is a devastating fire in one of the towns in my district, Madelia. Madelia is a city that has a rare occurrence of just about every business on Main Street being active, where a lot of towns you come into in the rural area are shuttered windows. This was a thriving business community in Madelia. And on February 3rd at either 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the morning, this fire started with multiple fire departments coming down the middle of a blizzard and making it very hard to fight the fire and basically utter destruction of Main Street. So this bill is for the infrastructure needs for Madelia, the work that they've done to repair the infrastructure. And I brought along with me I should say there's a non-state, doesn't require a match from the local community. It's $101,000. I brought with me from the community Brent Christensen. I'd like to introduce him and say a few words about the situation, Mr. Chair.
Welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Brent Christensen. Normally, I'm before this committee on behalf of the Minnesota Telecom Alliance, but I live in Madelia, and they have asked me to come up and testify. Behind me is our city administrator, assistant city administrator, chamber director, and for whatever reason, the city administrator doesn't want to come up and testify, so she wanted me to do it. We have a wonderful community of 2,300 that was devastated, as Representative Cornish said, on February 3rd. All of our businesses, the next day after the fire, committed to rebuilding and are in the process of rebuilding. The buildings are back, the structures are up, and 2 of the businesses have actually moved back. This bill before you today is to help the city recover the costs of the infrastructure that was lost, the sewer, water, and other facilities that were lost in the fire. And you know, I used to be the mayor of Madelia, and I will tell you that budget for a town our size isn't that large, so this had a devastating effect on the city of Madelia as well. So I would ask for your support, and with that, I would entertain any questions.
Thank you. Representative Cornish, do you have any other invited testifiers you wish to have testify today?
No, sir. No.
Thank you. This is a public hearing. Are there any members of the public who wish to testify in favor or voice concerns with the bill? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment portion and move to member questions. Representative Mahoney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I have a question for you and then for the testifier. I can't imagine that, I mean, haven't followed it that close, so you'll have to correct me or inform me, that the city of Madelia has not put $101,000, probably 2 or 3 or 4 times that amount into the recovery. So my question is, because it sets a bad precedent to not require any matching funds, you've already done that. It would, I have to believe that you already invested $101 or even $202,000, so why the non-state?
To either Representative Cornish or to the testifier, or perhaps to nonpartisan research if you wish to defer to them.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Mahoney, I will tell you that the work's already been done, and the city has already paid out that cost to do that. That obviously wasn't budgeted, a budgeted line item, so it wasn't something that they were anticipating having to do. That said, as far as this really just addresses the infrastructure piece, the sewer and water, it doesn't address all of the other things that, you know, the cleanup and all those things. So from the infrastructure part of it, I think this pretty much covers that, just that.
Representative Mahoney. Oh,
Mr. Chair, could I get an explanation as to if they had done other cleanup work and stuff, could that be counted as a state match?
sure. Mr. Zempel or Mr. Weeks?
Mr. Chair, members, I believe it's because the work's already been done is why it needed the exemption from the state match, because those are generally prospective grants, but I could look into it more closely and see if additional work that would be done by the city would count towards a match.
Representative Mahoney.
Well, Mr. Chair, and, you know, and I followed the news like everybody else in the state, and I'm thoroughly impressed by what Madelia has done and the commitment they made. I saw the pictures on the news, the buildings are back, which is great, and I'm thrilled. I just want to make sure that this does, I'm worried about setting a precedent of paying this kind of money out without a matching piece, so I want all the committee members, I want the chair to realize that that's, it's a very, very unusual way to do it, and I'm happy to do it. I'm going to vote for this. I think it should go forward, but that's just, that being said, it's an unusual way to do it, and we should not make a precedent of it.
Sure. So, Mr. Weeks, I mean, so I think the committee will take action on this bill today. But Mr. Weeks, if you could work with Representative Cornish and myself, I think there's probably a way to draft this language the way Representative Mahoney is referring to, so that the funds that have already been expended in areas outside of this would be counting as a proportional matching grant, so it's not just a 100% grant. Does that make sense, Representative Cornish?
Yes, Mr. Chair, and for comfort level, I have carried bills a couple of times before that have not required a non-state match, just simply because the community has been strapped and can't afford it. So.
Okay, so we'll work with Mr. Weeks and we'll take care of that, and then we can address that in Ways and Means. Mr. Christensen.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Mahoney, one thing I think that makes this unique, and I don't know of another time that I've ever seen it done, where the community has actually gone ahead, both the businesses rebuilding and then the city committing to rebuilding. You know, we're almost done and we're almost back, and we're not waiting for help.
Yeah.
We didn't wait for help.
I understand.
So,
Thank you.
any other questions? Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The same thing happened in my city of Melrose. I just want to ask you, in Madelia, how have you handled the increased property value from when your buildings were replaced? And that's a big item as well.
Mr. Christensen.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Anderson, that's a very good question, and that is something that makes me even more proud to be from Madelia than anything else, because our property owners didn't wait for any assistance. The property values on those buildings was approximately $80,000 before the fire, and those buildings are going to be valued at over $4.1 million when it's done. So it's an incredible increase. The city of Madelia stepped up right away, and that's one of the reasons I'm willing to come up here and talk on their behalf, because they stepped up and abated all of the taxes for 20 years. Watonwan County has abated the taxes post-fire, so they're holding the taxes at the date as they were the date of the fire for 20 years. So,
Any other questions from members? Any closing comments, Representative Cornish?
Well, just thank you and for helping a small rural town get back on its feet. I appreciate your support.
With that, Representative Thiessen renews his motion that House File 468 be recommended to pass and referred to the Committee on Ways and Means. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Motion prevails. Thank you, Representative Cornish.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members.
Representative O'Neill. Representative O'Neill moves House File 793 for possible inclusion in a later bill. Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Today I have the YWCA with me, and in the last biennium, we appropriated $750,000 for a new program that they've been, well, it's an extension of a program that they've been working on. I'm very excited to have them here again to tell us what they've done with that money, and we actually are asking for an increase of $750,000 in the biennium moving forward. So I'm going to turn over to my testifier so she can give us the great news as to what they've been working on and what they plan to do with the money of the increase.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the committee. Please state your
Thank
name
you.
for the record and proceed with your testimony.
My name is Mary Jones. I am the Chief Advancement and Program Officer at the YWCA of Minneapolis. Thank you to Representative O'Neill. Thank you, Chair Garofalo, and members of the committee. Thank you so much for funding our pilot workforce development program, which supports women in the community to get their Child Development Associate credential. The CDA credential is nationally recognized. It's supported by NAEYC, which is the National Association for the Education of Young Children. It's the first step in a laddered career path in a field with an acute shortage of workers. When they are finished, the women in these programs will be highly employable. Our first cohort of 9 is in the middle of its classroom experience. Our second cohort, which is twice the size, started yesterday. All of the students participating in this program are low income. All are women. All but 2 are people of color. Thus far, only one of these women, when they came to us, had a job at all, and that was a part-time job. The childcare industry is desperately in need of teachers, particularly people of color. We don't have statistics for the early childhood industry, but I will tell you that in the K through 12 world, only 3% of teachers are people of color. The students come from employment counselors, supportive housing programs like Simpson House, and culturally specific organizations like Issaroon. Your support has helped us create a viable, well-trained pipeline for early childhood professionals. We are very grateful, and we hope to continue at full capacity. We looked at 50 professionals for the first year as we ramped up, and we're looking at 100 every year thereafter. I would like you all to meet someone who went through the CDA program when it was just inside the YWCA, and she'd like to testify as well, if she may. Okay. Mata Gurma.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the committee. Please state your full name for the record and then proceed with your testimony.
Thank you for all. This is the first time to come in here. I'm from Ethiopia. I came in 13 years ago, an American. I work in YWCA 12 years. I work in like aid. I go on CDA class. That's good for me after 12 years. This year I'm going for CDA class. It's a lot of money to give me YWCA. I'm really love it that it's gonna be big deal for me to go to school. I'm single mom. I have 2 kids. It wasn't so helpful to be going to school. I love to be with the kids, to be more education, more developed. It's really good and help for me. It's really good.
Super. Well, thanks for your testimony. And could you please restate your name so that...
Mahadir Gurma.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any additional testifiers, Representative O'Neill? This is a public hearing. Are there any members of the public who wish to testify in favor or voice concerns with the bill? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment portion and move to member questions. Questions from members of the committee? Representative Dabney.
Well, Mr. Chair, less a question than many of us may have spent a little time today with the Minnesota Nurses Association and members from our districts because it's their day on the Hill. And I started my day that way and went around the room and everyone introduced themselves, and one of the women reminded me that we had first met when she was a child care provider at the Midtown YWCA in the toddler room. And I remembered the joy that my daughter experienced when she was able to move from the infant room to the toddler room where she could finally run without tripping over babies laying on the floor. So we have benefited from the child care services at the Midtown YWCA, and I think they're illustrating well here not only the need for trained child care providers, that this isn't babysitting. You need training, you need a knowledge base, and you need skills, but also responding to the diversity of the kids in childcare and the need to match some of that with the staff who provide care to those kids, for those parents, and for the administrators of the program. It all works better. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from members of the committee? Representative O'Neill, any closing comments?
I'm just very excited that we can move this forward. It's really amazing. We're talking about people that had no employment or had a very big challenge being employed, going through this program, and it's kind of filling two voids. That they need employment, and I'm so glad to hear you're from Ethiopia. I've actually traveled there, so we'll have to talk offline. And so we're taking some of our new immigrant population, and we're taking such a diversity and putting them in the workforce and putting them in front of kids that are diverse. And thank you, Representative Dabney, for pointing that out, that this is such a great match. So I'm very excited to be able to move this forward.
With that, Representative O'Neill renews her motion to have House File 793 laid over for possible inclusion in a later bill. Thank you, Representative O'Neill. Representative Mahoney. Representative Mahoney moves House File 620 for possible inclusion in a later bill, and Representative Mahoney, is the A1 amendment yours?
The A1 is mine.
Representative Mahoney moves the A1 amendment to get the bill in the form that he would like. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. The motion prevails. And I think that's our only amendment. Representative Mahoney, to your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have one testifier. Thank you for that amendment. It would have been, really would have been made my Latino community a little upset if we had left them off just because of a technical error. Good to catch it before it causes a pocket veto. Mr. Chair, committee members, the East Side Enterprise Center has been a godsend to the East Side. They have done a fabulous job in terms of getting the group together to work as a whole rather than individually and compete kind of with each other. And if you're ever looking for a good place to eat lunch, 7th Street from Payne Avenue East gets better and better. Of course, you gotta like south of the border food. So, Mr. Chair, members, I have, there's going to be 4 groups in here that are going to be participating. It is the African Economic Development Solutions, the Asian Economic Development Association, Dayton's Bluff Community Council, and the Latino Economic Development Center. I'm going to leave it there and turn it over to my testifier, Deanna Foster, who runs the East Side Enterprise Center.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Deanna Abbott Foster, and I am the Executive Director of the Dayton's Bluff Community Council and co-founder of the Eastside Enterprise Center. The Eastside Enterprise Center is a collaborative economic development hub for the East Side. We formed it to bring lots of local resources to the East Side, which was sorely in need of economic development resources after the departure of 3M and many other large companies. There was quite an economic gap, and the gap was being filled quickly by minority-owned immigrant businesses and other minority-owned businesses. But those businesses were very small and did not have the resources to actually grow. So a lot of the businesses were started, and as you know, many small startup businesses fail, and we wanted to make sure that they got on a growth trajectory. So that's what the Eastside Enterprise Center was about, bringing lots of resources in. We brought culturally specific groups together, many of which were very small organizations, and together we collaboratively created a working model that would not only increase the capacity of these small organizations that were culturally specific, but also increase our capacity to serve the many, many immigrant and minority businesses that were growing up on the East Side. So that's our work, and it's a very creative model that has worked very well to not only build these small organizations and their capacity to actually provide services, but also to increase the growth and prosperity of businesses on the east side of St. Paul. So we thank you for considering this. The Enterprise Center, although we focus on a specific geographic area, the organizations that we have as partners serve actually the whole metro area. We focus a lot on the east side, on the East Metro. So we're actually creating a lot of capacity for the East Metro. And of course, some of our organizations are even across the river in Minneapolis, and they serve there. So, so really, we have a model that creates collaboration, and together we work to increase our value in the community. And we also have a place that people know where to come. We create those relationships in communities, cross-cultural communities, and they know where we are and who can help them. So we look to this appropriation to really continue to build on this model and to grow our ability to serve more and more growing businesses, and to create, as you build businesses, of course, you create jobs. And small business development and growth to be medium-sized businesses and large businesses, of course, that's the way to get jobs. And so that's our model, and we hope that you will really support us in this effort.
Thank you. Representative Mahoney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. We've got all sorts of tales about how some of the victories that we've had with the East Side Enterprise Center, everything from helping truck farmers extend the life of their produce by bringing in refrigeration trucks, refrigeration systems, to helping numerous businesses grow from 1 or 2 people to 5 or 6. I won't try to bore you with that. The one nice thing is, for me, is that, you know, my community is becoming a pretty eclectic group of ethnic groups, and the idea to getting all 4 of these particular areas to work together makes for an interesting business association. So with your support, I'd like to have this laid over for possible inclusion.
Yep. Thank you, Representative Mahoney. This is a public hearing. Are there any other members of the public who wish to testify in favor or voice concerns with the bill? Seeing none, we'll go to member questions or comments. Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you tell me a little bit about the second paragraph and what your plans are on that?
To either Representative Mahoney or to the testifier?
The integrated service model and sharing, is that what you're
Yes.
talking about? We feel that those of you who know St. Paul, the east side of St. Paul is very much like a small town. It's very much locally oriented, and it's also very, very diverse. And so we think that an organization, a model like this, actually could be exported. Not that we would do the services in greater Minnesota, but that the idea of having a hub that actually can bring together local resources that already are there and often are not accessible to people locally because it's too hard to find the many different locations. And so this is a model that actually creates relationships across cultural divides and brings more resources to people. So we would love to learn more about what we're doing, what works best, and we think that we actually could share our wins and losses with other communities that have diverse populations, and they're really trying to build on the economic development potential. So we would love to share that as we go through this, and we're going to document what's happening and what works, and so local communities can actually learn from what we did in the east side of St. Paul and expand that.
Mr. Chair.
Representative Mahoney.
There are, a good example of that is we asked, was it 4 years ago or 2 years ago, Neighborhood Development Corporation to put together the same kind of model, and it typically takes a couple, 3 years to figure out what works. And Neighborhood Development Corporation, I can't remember, so I'm not going to say, but I know they're going out to a variety of towns with diverse populations and a lot of small businesses starting up across the state, and we're going to hopefully do the same.
Any additional questions? Representative Moran.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to say first, thank you so much for bringing this bill forward. We know Ramsey County has some of the highest economic disparities in the 7 metro county area, and I would say the east side is leading that in so many big ways. So creating this opportunity for business development and this partnership, I think, will really is really a good thing for not only, you know, the east side of St. Paul, but for the state. So thank you for your work on this.
Representative Anderson. Nope. Representative, huh? Well, it says Anderson, though. So, does Anderson mean Fabian? Is that what that?
Does he
Oh,
write
okay.
like a doctor?
Representative Fabian. No, it says Anderson. It's like I didn't misinterpret. Right? That says Anderson, right? How do you spell? How do you spell Fabian? Is that F-A-B or is that A-N-D-E-R?
Mr. Chair,
Representative Hefty.
what order of business are we on?
Representative Fabian was just about ready to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is Anderson that with an E or an O at the end? Swedish versus Norwegian. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Mahoney, just a couple of real quick questions. Line 1.7, it said it's a grant from the employment, from the Commissioner of Employment and Economic Development. Are they charging you an administrative fee to administer the money?
Representative Mahoney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Representative Fabian. I'm sure they are. They charge everyone a service fee, for a money handling fee.
Representative Fabian.
You said handling, okay, I'm sorry, okay. So then, I'm curious to know then, why would we do the grant to them? Why wouldn't we just do it right to the East Side Center for Enterprise, excuse me, the East Side Enterprise Center?
Mr. Chair,
Representative Mahoney.
you need to have a state entity that we can blame if something goes wrong.
Representative Fabian.
Okay, very good, thank you, Mr. Chair. Well then,
The candor factor is high today.
Yeah,
The Jobs Committee.
yeah.
So, Representative Fabian.
Fabian Anderson,
As long as they don't call you Mullery.
yeah. So then I'm curious to know how, there's 4 different entities that will be receiving the resources. How are they going to be divided between the African Economic Development Solution, the Asian Economic Development Solution, Dayton Bluff Community, and the Latino Economic Development?
Mr. Chair, I'll let,
Representative
I'll let Ms.
I
Foster.
can answer that.
Testify.
We have worked together now for 2 and some years, 2+ years, and we are going to collaboratively develop a contract with DEED, the Department of Employment and Economic Development, and work out that contract, and that contract is going to be based on outcomes that we expect in the different communities, and we're very well versed in tracking the resources that we get and also the outcomes. So, and that's all worked out with DEED. And we appreciate, actually, the participation of DEED because it keeps us, you know, kind of on track with everyone else that's doing economic development. And we're interested in doing that, and we want to be able to report positive things to you. And we have built enough trust among our organizations to actually have one contract, and that we will build our own capacity and also create the resources for the different communities.
Thank you.
Representative Fabian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So then on line 1.19, you're going to be sharing this report with other communities that are similar to the east side of St. Paul. Can you give me some examples of other communities that are similar to the east side of St. Paul? I mean, obviously, Roseau is not similar to east side St. Paul, I get that, but.
I think any community that has new immigrant populations that are moving in substantial numbers enough to be developing businesses. And I think a lot of smaller communities have had that, the influx of a lot of immigrants, and they have not had the capacity to know how to bring the resources that have traditionally gone to non-immigrant businesses. So I think any community that has a diverse population moving in, and it may be one group or it may be in numerous groups, as in the east side of St. Paul, but no matter, you need to develop your resources around cultural competence, because the same systems do not work in every culture. You need to develop those relationships, and I think that's what we're talking about.
So, Mr.
Representative
Chair, I'm sure you look at the demographics in the same fashion that I do, and there's towns the size of St. Cloud, Wilmer, Faribault, Rochester. All these towns have the potential for this kind of collaborative effort to grow, and not only grow, but to grow together, rather than individually and duplicate services that one's doing 6 blocks away.
Any additional questions from members of the committee? Representative Mahoney, or to the testifier, sometimes we have appropriations before us. It has to be for the full amount in order for the program to work. Other times, it allows us the opportunity to phase it in over 2 years at a slightly lesser amount. Which category would you put this one in? Is it?
I would say that this $2 million a year would be just fine, Mr. Chair. Phase
Not
it
what I
in that
asked,
way.
Representative Mahoney. All right. Any follow-up? Not the answer. All right. Representative Mahoney, any closing comments?
Mr. Chair, I don't know about the phase-in, and I think I would have to have a conversation with the group that are trying to collaboratively build this, and I'm certainly willing to tell you their answers as they can figure it out. The closing comments are that the east side in the last 5 or 6 years has really come together and embraced the fact that it is a very, very diverse community with a diverse set of business owners. Everything, as I said, if you go out West 7th, you wouldn't recognize, East 7th, you wouldn't recognize it from 10 years ago. And now we have to work on Payne Avenue, we have to work on Arcade, we have to work on, that's on the east side. But I know these others, the Asian community and with its University Avenue and the African Economic Development works in many ways on the western end of St. Paul that I know of, that I've visited. So this is a way that we can improve and bring together different cultures to work together and understand each other from where they're coming from. And I think that's an important piece of any kind of business.
Thank you, Representative Mahoney. With that, Representative Mahoney renews his motion to have House File 620 laid over for possible inclusion in a later bill. Thank you, and thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, committee members.
Members, that completes our agenda for the day. So with that, we'll see everyone tomorrow. The committee is adjourned.
You know what?